Good evening. My name is Beth Margison, and on behalf of the Portsmouth Public Library and the Citizens for Voter Education, welcome to this evening's Candidates Forum. This is the first time since 2018 that we have been able to hold a Candidates Forum for statewide elections, and we are delighted to have this back. The Citizens for Voter Education wishes to express its gratitude to the library's ongoing commitment to providing this forum to the voters. Tonight we will hear from some of the candidates for Executive Council and House of Representatives. Normally we would also hear from the candidates for State Senate, but neither Rebecca Perkins-Quilker or Don Cardinale will be in attendance tonight. The election will be held on Tuesday, November 5th. The polls will be open from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. The polling locations are as follows: Ward 1, New Franklin School; Ward 2, Portsmouth Middle School; Ward 3, Portsmouth Senior Activity Center; Ward 4, Dondero Elementary School; and Ward 5, Little Harbor School. If you are unsure where to vote, please check with the City Clerk section of the City website. Call 603-610-7245. Again, you may call the City Clerk at 603-610-7245, or email the City Clerk at cityclerk@cityofportsmouth.com. If you are not registered to vote, you may register to vote at the City Clerk's office during regular business hours or at the polls on Election Day. To register, you must show proof of citizenship, such as birth certificate, passport, naturalization papers, a citizenship affidavit, or any other document deemed reasonable by the registrars. You must show proof that you are 18 or older and proof of residence, such as a utility bill, a rental agreement, or a mortgage statement. The document must show your street address. No post office boxes or business addresses are acceptable. The voter ID law requires that you show a photo ID in order to vote. You may use a valid driver's license, DMV ID card, U.S. Armed Service ID, U.S. passport, valid New Hampshire student ID card, or any ID that contains a picture of yourself. If you don't have a photo ID, simply fill out a challenge voter affidavit. You'll receive a letter from the Secretary of State requesting information that you voted. Simply return the confirmation. Your vote will be counted. Absentee ballots are now available. You may vote by absentee ballot if you will be absent from the city on Election Day, absent due to religious observance, physical disability, or absent due to employment which involves the care of children or infirm adults with or without compensation, meaning whether paid or unpaid. Sample ballots for all of the wards have been posted on the City Clerk's website. There is a ballot question for this year's election asking the voters to approve an amendment, a modification to the state constitution mandating that no person shall hold the office of sheriff after the age of 70, and no person shall hold the office of judge after the age of 75. Please see your sample ballot for the full text of the proposed amendment change. Members of the audience here tonight are invited to submit written questions for the candidates. There are pencils and note cards on the chairs for this purpose. Just raise your hand, your question will be picked up. If we receive multiple questions on the same topic, they may be combined. This program is being broadcast on Channel 22. Now let us hear from the candidates themselves. The first candidate that we're going to hear from tonight is Jennifer Mandelbaum, who is running unopposed in District 21. She could not be here tonight, but she asked me to write a statement on her behalf. This again is from Representative Mandelbaum. Dear members, I wish I could have attended this candidates forum, but a work commitment prevented me from doing so. I've had the honor of serving the residents of Portsmouth Ward 1 in Newington in the New Hampshire House since March 2024, after a special election. My background in public health has given me the skills to make data-driven decisions that support both a healthy community and a healthy economy. I've spent the past 7 months hearing from you about the issues that affect your everyday life, like housing access, strong public education, and PFAS remediation. As I run for my first full term, I recommit myself to addressing the real concerns of Granite Staters. And while I'm running unopposed, I hope you'll support other Democratic candidates. With your support, we'll continue fighting for property tax relief, building and expanding the middle class, and reproductive freedom. Thank you for participating in this candidates forum and for using your vote to enact meaningful change. And again, that is from Jennifer Mandelbaum, who is running unopposed in District 1. Next, we will hear from the candidates for District 22. Mr. Rossi is the Republican challenger to the incumbent Kate Murray. Kate Murray could not be here tonight. She has asked me to read a statement on behalf. After that, Mr. Rossi will come up and address the audience and the television audience. This is from Kate Murray. I'm very sorry that a prior commitment prevents me from attending this evening's discussion. I am very appreciative that I have been allowed to submit in writing my positions on the issues that you will be discussing. It has been a genuine pleasure to serve as your state representative, and I very much look forward to continuing in that role. This will be my 5th term, and I have served on the Finance Committee for the past 3 terms, working in Division 2, which constructs the budget for the Department of Education, Department of Transportation, Department of Safety, Police Standards and Training, and Fish and Game. We have hard decisions to make when creating a balanced budget. My goal is to provide as much support as possible to local communities in support of public education, access to health care, and programs that address issues of climate change and the health of our environment, all while maintaining local control. I have been endorsed by the National Education Association of New Hampshire and by the Teamsters Local 633 of New Hampshire. For education, Ms. Murray, Representative Murray says, I strongly oppose the voucher system passed by the Republicans. I believe that public tax dollars should go to public education. The system pushed through by the Republicans is the only state or federal program that has absolutely no guardrails. They originally said that the program was to help people who do not have the means to send their children to a private school. The vast majority of the students receiving these vouchers were never in public school system to begin with, and this past year the Republicans tried to eliminate all financial limits on who is eligible for the program entirely. We were able to stop this effort, but it'll be back again next year. Further, you only have to apply to the program once. Say a parent enrolls their child in 1st grade, and over the next couple of years, their earning capacity grows to exceed $250,000 per year or more. That child would continue to receive a voucher of several $100,000 each year until they graduate. There is an audit underway to look at oversight of this program. However, Commissioner Edelblut refuses to provide any information regarding how the DOE is providing oversight on the third-party company that administers the program, which is allowed to take 10% of each voucher for themselves. Although I would be very glad to see this program disappear entirely, I fear this horse has left the barn. That said, we must enact appropriate guardrails addressing eligibility, going back to the Republicans' original purpose to help students who need financial aid. Also, people should have to resubmit each year to ascertain that they are still eligible, as they do with every other social support program. Further, there needs to be a cap on the maximum amount allotted in each year. This runaway program must be contained and oversight must be transparent. All we really know is that over $800,000 has gone directly to Amazon and over $1 million to only 3 private faith-based schools. Many other similar schools receive money as well, but in smaller amounts. Imagine what $1 million would do for all the students attending one struggling school located in a poverty-poor district. On reproductive rights, Representative Murray says, all women have the right to reproductive health care and to make their own reproductive decisions. I feel strongly that the government has no place at this table and has no right to interfere in or restrict a woman's access to health care. This past term, we defeated a bill that would have banned abortion at 6 weeks before most women know they are pregnant. We have also seen a proposal to ban abortion when there is a detectable heartbeat. These kind of bills will certainly be back again, and we will defeat them again. As for responsible gun legislation, Representative Murray goes on to say, I have never been able to understand why responsible gun owners are so opposed to responsible gun safety legislation, as such legislation would have no effect on them if they are indeed so responsible. I support basic common sense legislation, including background checks, red flag laws, and a waiting period. The notion that Democrats want to take people's guns is just plain gibberish. As for climate change, Representative Murray says, we are indeed facing an existential crisis with regards to climate change. We see 100-year floods almost yearly now, and we know what needs to be done. On transportation, Representative Murray says, I fully support efforts to expand public transportation and access to it. Our Department of Transportation works very hard in the face of great challenges that impact how they get their work done. As with many other state departments, we pay lower wages than our neighboring state. An advantage we have is that the NHDOT pays their bills on time and is reliable, so they are still able to hire workers. Property taxes. There was a very strange turnabout this year when I, as a relatively liberal Democrat, had to speak out against a Republican plan which would have doubled your statewide education property taxes, otherwise known as SWIFT. Republicans argued that they were going to rearrange how the bills looked so that no one would notice, and so it really was not a doubling of the property tax. I am still struck by the irony that we now have Democrats telling Republicans that you cannot go around raising taxes. It looked like we were actually going to lose this fight, but after enormous pressure at the last minute, the Republicans retracted the proposal. Instead, Republicans have been decreasing the amount of taxes paid by out-of-state, international, and multinational companies. Eliminating the interest and dividends tax will result in a loss to the state of around $160 million. Business revenues are good, but the tax cuts to these large and mainly out-of-state companies results in a loss of about $200 million. These losses in corporate tax dollars result in the state's inability to provide needed services to granted staters or an increase in your taxes. Business taxes. Representative Murray says, according to New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute, our corporate tax revenues, while increasing, are doing so more slowly than the rest of the country. Nationwide, from 2015 to 2022, corporate tax revenues have increased 172%. In New England, without including New Hampshire, revenues have increased 171%. In New Hampshire, these revenues have increased 118%. We are behind the national average on this and last in New England. Further, the NHFPI also finds no evidence that concurrent business tax reductions led to increased revenue by spurring more economic activity. In fact, their analyses show that New Hampshire lost between $496 million and $729 million in revenue because of these business tax reductions, which means less money for needed services and an increased burden on resident taxpayers to close this difference. In the most recent report, just out in the last couple of weeks, the state is looking at a deficit. The shortfall in the fall report is around $20 million and is almost $40 million behind revenues compared to last year. This is due to the irresponsible Republicans who cut taxes with all the benefits from these cuts going to out-of-state entities. The result is a reduction in services that the state can offer and an increase locally in residents' tax bills. The Republicans will say that this is not their problem, but a local matter, and that you should vote out the local representatives who enact these increases. In fact, this is a state under Republican leadership who are shirking their responsibility to the state and their constituents. And lastly, Representative Murray says, under the Republicans, the state has downshifted its responsibilities to local communities, which has had a significant impact on rising property taxes. At the same time, under the Republicans, local control has come under assault. They seem to feel that local control is fine as long as it is in accordance with their views. I feel strongly that the state needs to fulfill its obligations to local communities and also respect their right to local control. Representative Murray's full statement is on the back for anybody who would wish to read it. But now we will hear from the Representative Murray's Republican challenger, Mr. Tom Rossi. Mr. Rossi will, like all of the House of Representatives speakers tonight, has been asked to prepare a 3-minute opening statement on which he will address the following question: what are the 3 most critical challenges facing our state?
Thanks, Beth.
Sure.
Well, I'd like to start by thanking Beth and the Citizens for Voter Education for arranging this forum and inviting us here today. As pointed out, I am a Republican, but I also want to point out that I guess you'll see from my comments that I'm not here to tell you that I think the Republican Party is always right or the Democratic Party is always wrong. Rather, I think we have some commonalities on topics of importance Maybe some differences in strategies about how to address them, but you see what you think after you hear what I have to say. So my wife, Kathy, and I moved here from New Jersey about 11 years ago. We left behind a state that had very, very high taxes, a high income tax, 9.5% marginal rate, a high sales tax of 7%, property taxes that were about 75% higher than what we found here, and yet it was a state that had perpetual budget deficits, it was rife with corruption, and it was absolutely inept in the way it provided services to its citizens. The lesson learned for us is that you cannot tax your way out of or into prosperity within the government. The high tax levels really did not help. What we found here is a state with low taxes, budget surpluses, low crime rates, a high sense of personal accountability and responsibility and independence amongst the citizenry, and we like it. We didn't realize what it was called when we moved here. We've since learned that it's called the New Hampshire Advantage. And I think that our first challenge is to preserve that advantage as we consider various options about how to collect and spend revenue within the state. I do think that Kate has pointed out some significant issues with regard to revenue trends within the state, but I do not think that those trends can be or should be addressed by increasing or maintaining high tax rates. Rather, I think that the focus needs to be on fiscal discipline so that we can address budget shortfalls in that manner. We also have a major challenge on the seacoast with affordability of housing for middle and fixed income residents. We all see it. Is that 1 minute that I've used or 1 minute that I have left?
1 minute to go, but I think that's going to be pretty easy.
Well, I hope so. I think we all know that the middle income and working income families in this area are being squeezed out of the town. We see high property values leading to people coming in, knocking down affordable housing stock, and replacing it with housing units that just simply can't be approached. So what can we do about that from the state level? Part of it is just national trends that we can't change, but there are a few things that I think we can do to help with affordability for people in this bracket. One is to be very careful about property taxes and find some property tax relief. I do think property tax reform is possible. We fund through our taxes the infrastructure that enables the meals and room tax to be, I'm going to ignore that sign, thank you, that enables the meals and room tax to go into Concord and provide a lot of the state revenue. I'd like to see some of that come back to New Hampshire, to Seacoast property owners, residential property owners, for properties assessed at or below the median value in the form of an annual tax credit to help make ends meet. I'd also like to see a focus on increasing transportation so that we can broaden the map for where people can live and work within Portsmouth. And I agree with Kate on that. I think that some focus has to be placed on that because transportation is part of it. And we need some regulatory reform. There's a lot of experimentation going on in various towns and communities around the state to enhance the ability to build accessory dwelling units and to speed up the process of approval and building through various changes to regulatory. We should look at that, figure out the best practices, and promulgate those around the state. Finally, I think a major challenge for the future of this state is to provide the kinds of jobs and opportunities that will attract our children and their children to stay in the state once they've become educated and qualified for high-paying jobs. We need a base of those jobs for people to prosper. Without that, then everything else will fall apart. So I think the keys to making that happen, we can do a better job of incentivizing, particularly biotech companies. We live about 60 miles away from the largest, most wealthy biotech investment hub in the world, and we can do some incentives to attract some of those companies to come into Portsmouth and expand upon what was started with Lonza and I'm blanking on the other company's name. But anyhow, that's something we can build upon. I do think that school choice is part of achieving educational excellence in our state and allowing students to find the educational environment in which they will thrive. So I do promote that. And I think by a combination of excellent education, some work on lowering energy costs, and attracting some of these high-paying industries to the area, we can provide prosperity for this generation and future generations to come. So if we do these things by working across party lines to bring the best ideas forward, I think we can keep New Hampshire on the path to prosperity and ensure opportunity and freedom of individual choice for everyone who lives here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rossi. And we have questions from the audience. The first is on your opening statement, you touched on the biotech industry in New Hampshire and the need to attract businesses to those sorts of businesses to the state. Which specifically should we do to attract biotech companies?
I like the idea of a program of allowing startup biotech companies, which, by the way, always operate at a loss while they're in their venture funding phase and before they have products on the market. I like the idea of allowing them to sell their net operating losses on a state-supervised market where perhaps utility companies and other companies can pick up those losses. That will help them alleviate their tax burden, but it will also provide capital, some operating runway for startups that are always fighting the battle of trying to postpone the date on which they run out of money and find new capital until they can get a product developed and on the market. So a market for selling net operating losses can be just the added incentive we need to attract some of those companies to come up here.
Okay. And so touching on something else in your opening statement, property taxes.
Yes.
Something that is concerned. Your district is Portsmouth Ward 5 and Newcastle, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So question from the audience is that many in New Hampshire don't realize that the property tax formula means that high-value residential properties are assessed at a much lower percentage of their fair market value than lower-value properties. This can be verified by looking up the assessed value of a recently sold multi-million-dollar home and comparing the assessed fair market value percentage to a lower-value home that sold recently. Thus, the property tax burden is falling more heavily on those who own much lower-valued homes. Would you support legislation to remedy this?
I think there are a lot of idiosyncrasies, shall we call them, in the way that properties are assessed. I think another problem that we have is looking at the reassessment that's going on right now in Portsmouth. The commercial properties assessments are only going up by about 10%. I know the residential property assessments are going up at a much higher rate. Ours went up, I think, about 80%, 75%, something like that. So there are a lot of these trends that are causing, I would say, inequities in the way that properties are assessed. And I don't understand it as well as I would need to support a legislative approach. But I would think that a legislative approach in sorting that out would be beneficial.
Okay, and the last question for Mr. Rossi. With inflation pricing, the recent effects of revaluation on property taxes and out-of-site rents, how can you affect policy in Concord that will help someone on a fixed income be able to afford to remain a resident of New Hampshire?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Part of it is the idea that I already brought forward about allowing the state to, or encouraging or making the state provide some property tax credits to homes that are at and below the median, and also for fixed income residents. There is an approach already in place for seniors who can get some property tax relief, but it's a means-tested approach that can be expanded to include more people. But we also have to remember that the more we do that, the more we're going to cost shift burdens to the properties that don't fall under those under those categories. But those are the kinds of things that we can do.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Rossi, we would like to hear we have asked all the candidates to give a 1-minute closing statement. So, Mr. Rossi, if you could please move on to your closing statement.
Yes, I can. This time, I think you can put your signs up, because I think I will be done in 1 minute. So I just want to say that when Kathy and I moved to New Hampshire, it was just the two of us in our family. Since then, my 91, almost 92-year-old mom has moved up. We're helping her stay in Portsmouth by helping her with her rent. Our daughter, our adult daughter, and our adult son moved up, and we have just had the blessing of our first grandchild being born in Goffstown through our daughter. So we now have 4 generations of our family here, and that has encouraged me to think a little bit differently about New Hampshire than when we moved here. When we moved here, I was interested in what New Hampshire had to offer as a nice place to retire. But now I am thinking very much about future generations, keeping New Hampshire a great place to live and a great place to prosper. I want my kids and I want their kids to be able to get a great education here and to be able to get a great job here and to afford to live here and raise their own families. And that is why I am running for office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rossi. And next, we will hear from the Democratic candidate for District 26 in the House of Representatives, Buzz Scher, and we will ask him to read his opening statement first.
Thank you. Good evening. By way of background, this is the first time I've run for a state representative, so I want to give you a little bit of my background. I've been a law professor at UNH School of Law for 31 years now. This is my last full-time year. I'm retiring as of the end of this year, partly because I want to work in the legislature. I've been a police commissioner in Portsmouth for the last just about 3 years. And we've accomplished a lot there. We now we're going to have body cams for each officer by the beginning of next year. We've got a new software system that allows us to track demographic profiles of everyone who is stopped by the police. We now have a social worker working in the police department who's helping with the aftercare of people who have have called into 911, either they or someone close to them who've had a mental health crisis. We've gotten involved in the statewide mobile crisis unit, which allows, in certain circumstances not involving the risk of violence, allows a team of mental health professionals to show up at the scene of a mental health crisis rather than have 2 police officers in uniform and armed, albeit in Portsmouth, ones who are well-trained in de-escalation. But we've seen the mental health calls coming into the police station, the police department over the last year decline by about 35 to 40%, given the work we've been doing in that area. So I'm very proud of the work we've been doing on the Police Commission, along with the 2 other commissioners. I was former chair of the board of the ACLU of New Hampshire for 7 years. Have a deep commitment to civil liberties, was also on the national board of the ACLU for 7 years. Which was interesting, exciting, and incredibly frustrating experience, listening to 73 civil libertarians decide what the right thing to do is. I've worked the last 8 years. One of the primary focuses of my life has been working as a social justice advocate in the legislature. Sometimes would work with the ACLU, sometimes would work with more conservative organizations, and I think I've helped make a difference on important legislation in terms of privacy. I helped author a constitutional amendment on information privacy that was passed. Boy, this has gone quick. And I've been deeply involved from the beginning in bail reform, working with Representative Muse. So, three issues. Most important issue to me, and really what's made the decision for me to run for the legislature, is the overuse of the criminal justice system to try and manage mental health issues, to try and manage homelessness, to try and manage substance abuse, primarily by locking people up in jail, pretrial, on bail, where they're not getting any services. What we've learned over the years is the huge majority of services in House of Corrections have gone to people who are sentenced to the House of Correction, not people who are sitting in jail awaiting trial. And too often, although not the case in Portsmouth, but too often, the criminal justice system is effectively misused to manage those things. And I think that's got to change. And that's something I'm deeply committed to. It's going to involve, raising the minimum age. It's going to involve finding creative ways to finance better pretrial services organizations. It's going to find ways to to create social service nonprofits like Crossroads House, which has done a wonderful job on the Seacoast, but is overburdened very quickly. Second issue I want to focus on is getting rid of the voucher system, and it is not appropriate to be spending money for people whose children were already in private school, giving them supplements. It is not what public education is about. People who are committed to sending their children to public school should pay for it. That's a decision to be made. To the extent we solve the school financing problem, which has been going on since the mid-'90s in New Hampshire, since the Claremont case was decided, that system needs to be fixed so that all our students are getting an adequate public education, and then perhaps we won't have people needing to send their children to private school. Finally, very briefly, reproductive rights. I'm deeply committed to a constitutional amendment protecting the right to abortion in New Hampshire. I think that that's the best way to ensure what we need.
Okay. So to that end, a couple of challenges from the audience then. The first is on abortion. And the question from the audience is, in a state where abortion law is stable and is more liberal than the country of France, allowing abortion for any reason until 26 weeks, do you feel New Hampshire's abortion law and freedom of choice is comparable to most other liberal states? And perhaps you can, given your thoughts as to a constitutional amendment, describe how you believe that New Hampshire's current law is inadequate.
New Hampshire's law is inadequate because I'm a deep believer in taking away the freedom of people to interfere in a woman's decision of what to do with her body. The allegation that somehow the state is entitled and other people are entitled to have that freedom is wrong. I think because abortion has been so much a part of the last 50 years of discussion in New Hampshire and nationally, leaving abortion to the vagaries of the legislative process on a year-by-year basis is a big mistake, and I think only a constitutional amendment will protect that.
Okay. And a question from a member of the audience who is in special education in the public school system says that he is strongly in favor of school choice. A family should be allowed to choose a school where their children will thrive. One size does not fit all. It says here we support the creation of new charter schools as well as availability of school vouchers for families seeking a better option for their child. You've made your position known, but perhaps you can specifically address children with special needs that may not be well served by the public schools.
If we solve our adequate public education funding, if we meet what the New Hampshire Constitution requires, that every student is entitled to an adequate education, and the legislature once and for all decides how to solve that problem, then special education access access to better special education services will be improved. A version of a rising tide lifts all boats. If we can solve that so schools are well funded, then we won't have to say, well, I should get money to send my child to a private school.
Okay. And so the last question is on the legalization of marijuana. You're a police commissioner, a law
Yes.
professor. Marijuana is legal in the neighboring states of Vermont, Maine, and Massachusetts. New Hampshire, hard hit by the opioid epidemic, has been hesitant to legalize marijuana. The impacts of legalizing marijuana in the states that have done so have raised concerns about increasing access to adolescents and an increase in dependence and need for more treatment, the costs of which often offset any revenue raised. What are your thoughts on legalizing marijuana?
I don't think it's the case. One, marijuana should be legalized. The debate in the legislature has become how to do it. Do we use a model like the state liquor store model, or do we allow private companies to open stores in New Hampshire? I think that's, practically speaking, that's the nature of the debate in New Hampshire at this point. I disagree with the proposition that the revenue generated in those states where marijuana is legalized is outweighed by the cost of treatment. I don't think there's data that supports that proposition whatsoever, and I think the level of I do not believe the level of social service costs to marijuana being legal is anywhere near the amount of revenue being generated by legalized marijuana, though I don't believe that's the primary reason to legalize marijuana.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Scher, and if you would like to please read your closing statement.
Thank you. I appreciate those questions. Probably haven't satisfied some of the people who asked those questions, but that is welcome to the political world. I'm going to turn my phone off. Thank you. One of the things I've learned about myself over the last 7 or 8 years that I've been doing pretty aggressively working in the legislature is something that kind of surprised me when I started doing it. I have a surprising, to me, skill of being able to talk to legislators across the aisle. The constitutional amendment that I wrote that was eventually passed on information privacy, protecting information privacy in New Hampshire, I wrote that for a very conservative Republican legislator who also happened to be a privacy nut, like me. The bail reform work that I've done from the beginning, the original Bail Reform Act of 2018 was one that I drafted for then Senator Dan Feltus, a Democrat who later would run for governor. The most recent so-called grand compromise on bail reform that Representative Muse and others were leaders on House criminal justice in getting passed. I was intimately involved in that and worked very closely with the Republican chair of the House Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee. I have worked closely with members of the Freedom Caucus and members of the ACLU of New Hampshire and Black Lives Matter and Americans for Prosperity. I can talk to everybody, and that means I have a better chance in cooperation with other legislators of getting stuff done, not just talking about principles. I view myself as a pragmatic progressive rather than a performative progressive. And as my daughter requires me to say at the end of any talk I give, it's easy to vote for me. I'm the only buzz on the ballot.
Thank you, Mr. Scher. The next candidate that we will hear from is unfortunately through me, so that's more talking for me. But Mr. Jerry Ward, who is the representative from District 27, is ill with COVID, and he has asked me to read a statement on his behalf. His challenger, Diane Bitter, is not in attendance tonight. So from Representative Ward, in answering the three most critical challenges facing our state, in my view, again, this is Representative Ward, the most critical challenge facing our state is simply the MAGA Republican attempt to take our state back to the 19th century in terms of individual rights, women's rights, voting rights, economic policy, attitudes toward climate change, and a host of other critical issues, including common sense gun safety. Specifically, I would highlight the ongoing Republican attempts to limit a woman's right to control her own body, including efforts to extend the current ban on abortion. Reproductive rights, including access to birth control, IVF, and comprehensive health care, are fundamental rights that need to be preserved. Secondly, I am dismayed by the seemingly unending MAGA Republican attempts to suppress the vote, especially among young voters, old voters, absent-minded voters, and many others. I am glad to be a co-sponsor of a bill in the next session designed to repeal HB 1569, an over-the-top voter suppression law signed recently by the governor. As a member of the Committee on Election Law, I have worked with others to keep our elections among the most open and free in the country, something that was a completely bipartisan issue until Trump's big lie began to infect the minds of his followers. Protecting voting rights is basic to protecting our democracy. Thirdly, the housing crisis is a major challenge facing the state that will require the cooperation of federal, state, and local officials to address. Young people simply cannot afford to buy a house in Portsmouth, for example, as many of you know, and we know from personal experience in our own family. Vice President Harris's proposal to help first-time homebuyers with their down payments, for example, would be a major step. The New Hampshire Democratic Party has a wide array of proposals designed to address this issue in creative and imaginative ways that will address the root causes as well as provide possible solutions to this complex issue of paramount importance to the state's workforce. And then his closing statement. This is Representative Ward's closing statement. He extends his thanks to the Citizens for Voter Education for hosting this event and his apologies for not being there in person. I would be there if I were not still testing positive for COVID. I would like to remind voters that the polling place for Ward 4 on November 5th will be Portsmouth High School. I am running, I believe that's Portsmouth. I'll have to check on that. I am running again for state representative to maintain traditional New Hampshire values in the face of an extremist Republican faction aimed at destroying the very values we hold dear. This faction of lapsed libertarians, so-called free staters, and MAGA Republicans has eradicated the old school Republican Party. These extremists are bent on taking us back to the mid-19th century. I first ran for state office because of the shameless Republican assault on public education. The most egregious ongoing example is the unconstitutional Republican voucher program designed to funnel your tax money to private religious schools. These schools can ignore science and civics, pick and choose their students, employ uncertified teachers, and otherwise help establish a theocracy in the 21st century. We need to maintain our strong public schools, accessible to all and dedicated to intellectual inquiry. I have constantly voted to sustain our tradition of free, fair, and open elections in the face of Republican efforts to suppress the vote, especially among young voters. This remains particularly important. We need a Democratic majority in the legislature and a governor who will truly support New Hampshire values. I humbly ask for your vote. And again, that is the opening and closing statement of Representative Jerry Ward, who is from District 27. And with that, we will move on to Representative David Muse. David Muse is the Democratic incumbent who represents the 1st and 5th wards of Portsmouth, as well as Newcastle and Newington. A little intro for him as he takes his seat. Representative Muse, your opening statement, please.
First of all, thanks to everyone for coming out. Thanks to Citizens for Voter Education for providing the opportunity to do this. This is something that I did before I started my first term in 2018. I enjoyed it a lot. It's always a different kind of experience being up here versus up in Concord, where there are 400 of us sitting in a room trying to make sense of everything that's going on in front of us. A lot of people treat state rep races like they're not very important. And one of the reasons why I ran for this seat, and one of the reasons why I'm committed to doing this work, is because it is important. We have a tendency these days to view a lot of our problems through a national lens. We watch our favorite national networks, and a lot of us get our views and our opinions from the things that we watch there. But I think the thing that a lot of us don't realize is that the decisions that really impact our lives the most are decisions that are made by people like me in places like Concord. So thank you for coming out, and thank you for listening. In terms of the challenges that our state faces, I think one of the biggest challenges we face is protecting freedom. And I think that starts with protecting a woman's right to choose, to get the reproductive care that she needs based on the advice of the people that she decides to bring into the process, and not legislators who want to insert themselves into the process. I also think it's very important to do what's necessary to protect some of the LGBTQ kids in our schools. Currently, there have been a series of really unfortunate attacks that have a lot of kids in that position concerned about their personal safety. And I think it's important that these kids are able to enjoy the same kind of protections against non-discrimination that the rest of us enjoy. So that's something that I think is a priority. Another challenge is one that virtually everyone has talked about so far, and that's really supporting our current workforce. And by supporting our workforce, I think mainly we're talking about childcare, and we're talking about housing. We all want to grow New Hampshire's economy. That's a really, really good thing. But it's hard to grow an economy when you don't have enough places for the people, for people that employers who want to hire, we don't have enough homes for them to actually live in. It's hard when the homes that we do have are unaffordable for many people. It's extremely difficult when you have couples who are both working as hard as they can trying to pay those semi-unaffordable rental and purchase prices, and they choose to have kids, and then they're faced with sky-high childcare costs as well. So when it comes to things like housing, I think that there are things that we can do at the state level that can help. I think there are things that we can do to nudge things along, but one of the things that I'm personally very careful not to do is to impose solutions that may work well on one community like Portsmouth that may not work well on another community like Manchester or Tamworth or any one of the hundreds of New Hampshire communities that we have out there. I think one of the things that we can do that actually will help is to create approaches to legislation. For instance, in Montana, one of the things that they've done is they've created land use guidelines for communities that actually can accelerate the development of housing and accelerate the development of affordable housing. So I think that there are things like that we can do. There are things that I would love to do. I would love to be able to pour more money into it. Unfortunately, we have a budget that we need to balance. And the money to do things like that, in many cases, if it's available, it's typically not available in the kind of quantity that we like it to be in. The third set of challenges, and these are the ones that I've probably worked the hardest on, and it's preserving and protecting public health and public safety. So when we talk about public health, my view of that is that it also includes protection against environmental contamination. I've done a lot of work with the Seacoast Long-Term Drinking Water Commission and the Safe Water Advisory Group of the Portsmouth City Council, and in the legislature by prime sponsoring and sponsoring bills that have done everything from specify what the maximum contaminant levels should be for PFAS. We've tried to get accelerate private well testing and disclosure of those results in New Hampshire. And in the most recent session of the legislature, a bill that I wrote that we actually passed is one that ensures that in the future, any environmental settlement money that New Hampshire gets for contamination is actually spent to help the victims of that contamination, to remediate that contamination, or to monitor that contamination. We had a situation where we received a very large PCB settlement a few years ago where a good chunk of that money was directed to the general fund. And the problem with directing it to the general fund is once it's there, it not only can be used to remediate contamination, it can be used for lawnmower gasoline, copier paper and toner, and just about anything else you could throw into the state budget. So making sure that things like that are being done and taken care of has been a big focus of mine. Another one has been gun violence prevention. I'm actually the leader of the House Gun Violence Prevention Caucus. I have prime sponsored and sponsored several bills that have tried or have attempted to reduce the risk of gun violence in our communities and to our citizens. Those have not been successful to date, but like many things in the legislature, we will keep trying. I guess to basically wrap up, I would say that none of the challenges that we've heard tonight are especially easy to solve. But I think the important thing to realize is there's a huge amount of value in talking openly about these problems, talking openly about what the root causes of the problems are, because until we can agree on what the root causes of the problems are and what the problems themselves are, it's very, very difficult to agree on the solutions that we want. So the bottom line is that the work we do up there can make a difference, and I think for our futures, it has to make a difference.
Thank you, Representative Muse. Some questions for you. The average cost of educating a child in the state of New Hampshire is $20,000, with only about a quarter provided by state funding. The rest is raised from local property taxes. A recent Superior Court decision held that the state must provide more funding to towns and cities. How should the state raise the money to do that?
How should the state raise the money to do that?
Yes.
I think one of the things that we need to look at, first of all, is we need to understand how much money we're talking about, first of all. In terms of ways to raise money to pay for it, I think one of the things we kind of have lost sight of over the last 6 years is we have less and less revenue coming into the state because we've lowered business taxes and we've gotten rid of the interest and dividends tax. So those are things that are already chopping a major hole in our budget. As to where the money will come from, I don't know where the money will come from. I think that's a $64,000 question everybody is asking, and it's why everybody's following this case so closely. One of the things that the courts have done in the past is they have taken this issue and they have thrown it back into the hands of the legislature. And the legislature, for better or worse, and this is Republicans and Democrats over the past 30 years, has not really resolved the issue. We still have tremendous educational disparities in this state. The quality of an education that a kid gets in Portsmouth is much better than the quality of the education in a place like Claremont or Berlin. And part of the reason for that is because they have to pay building costs, they have to pay for teachers, same as we do. The issue that they have is the property values in those communities are worth so much less than in communities like Portsmouth. They have a much smaller tax base that they can draw on. So proportionately, people in those communities are paying much more for their schools than we pay in a community like Portsmouth. So we have a lot of issues that we have to address. My hope is that if it gets thrown back to the legislature, that this time we can actually figure out a way to do something productive with it. But there's also a part of me that hopes that maybe the courts basically tell us and are more prescriptive in terms of what we need to do, and I think that would actually help spur the action that's necessary after 30 years of not much action at all.
Thank you. A follow-up question from the audience on guns. What is the risk of gun violence in New Hampshire based on New Hampshire statistics? Aren't our violent crime stats the lowest in the country?
Well, I think all you have to do is look at a state like Maine, where they didn't think they had much of a gun violence problem either until until October of last year when the Lewiston shooting happened. So the issue is that in our society, with as many guns as we have in circulation, and the ability of people that openly carry them, in New Hampshire we don't require people to get a license to own them. I think one of the issues is we're in a situation where what used to be just a simple argument between a couple of people who might duke it out all of a sudden becomes a gunfight at the Portsmouth traffic circle. The bottom line is you can't that the risk of gun violence in this state has escalated every single year that I've been in the legislature, and I think we have a choice, and it's a fundamental choice. Do we wait until a Lewiston or a Newtown or an Uvalde, happens in one of our communities, or do we take steps that other states have taken, many times in response to incidents like this? But we take these steps proactively so we can prevent things. I mean, one of the worst situations we were in the legislature last year was when Bradley Haas was shot at New Hampshire Hospital. He was somebody who was known to members of our committee. He was somebody who was well known and well liked in the law enforcement community. And when he was murdered, it really hit home. And I think one of the things that it actually took to get Democrats and Republicans working together to pass legislation that would allow reporting of people with mental health issues to the FBI background checks database was losing a life. And that's the thing, and the reason why I fight for this every single day is I don't want to be that guy who is trying to pass this legislation after something like that happens. It's the worst position to be in.
Thank you, Representative Hughes. And the final question is about climate change. The impacts of climate change are in the news daily and are being felt in the Granite State and here on the Seacoast. What are your views regarding climate change? Would you make it a priority? And do you believe New Hampshire should adopt legislation to reduce climate pollution and advance clean energy solutions?
Climate change is going to be a priority whether we want it to or not. And I think, people over the last month and a half or so down in Florida have sort of found that out the hard way. These are lessons I think that people in New Hampshire can find out the hard way too. In January, I was down in the south end of Portsmouth and down at Prescott Park after we had a major winter storm with significant flooding, and I was watching water being pumped out of houses I'd never seen water being pumped out of before. I've never seen Prescott Park almost completely underwater. There are things I think that we can do to make us more resilient at communities. Some of the work we're doing on the Seacoast Long-Term Drinking Water Commission, we're getting at that by trying to provide interconnection between different communities so we have backup. We're looking into things like saltwater penetration of groundwater as sea levels rise and things like that. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to prepare us for this. But big picture, we have to get serious about renewable energy, about electrification of vehicles and about pouring less stuff into the atmosphere that causes warming. And that's something we need to do on a local basis, a state basis, and a national basis, because that's what's going to make a difference.
Okay, thank you, Representative Muse. And you can please read your closing statement.
Sure. I mean, what I'd like to say in closing is that one of the biggest challenges we have in the legislature is the composition of the legislature. So one of the things that we try to do is we try to represent all the taxpayers out there. But the vast majority of the people representing taxpayers out there are people who look like me. They're in their 60s, they're in their 70s, some of them are in their 80s. They're people who might be independently wealthy, they're retirees, they're people who might have a working spouse with a great job and some time on their hands. The issue is the people in Concord are not like the vast majority of working people. And so some of the things that we prioritize and some of the things that we choose to fight over are things that I don't think the average person would want us to be fighting over. Changing the composition of our legislature is going to be very hard. We're constitutionally limited to $100 a year salary. That's why we see so many retirees and so many wealthy people on the legislature. There are huge barriers to service for people who we would benefit from tremendously if we could hear more from them in the legislature. And one of the best things about the COVID experience, from my perspective as a legislator, is we didn't require people to come up to Concord anymore to testify to hear them. We were actually able to let them come in via Zoom. So a mom who has 3 kids who can't get away from her house in Lancaster could actually weigh in on some of our bills and testify. And I think we need to find a way in a process that where so many people are, seem to be excluded from the process. I think we do need to do a better job of inviting more people into the process in a productive way. So I think that's something that I would like to see.
Thank you, Representative Muse. That concludes our session on the House of Representatives. Next, we will move to the Executive Council while everybody sort of makes their way. I would like to invite Dr. Bob Stevens to the podium. The incumbent Republican counselor for District 3 cannot be here tonight. She had another event across the district. So her father, I apologize, her husband, Dr. Bob Stevens, has come to read a statement on her behalf.
There or here?
You can read here if you would like.
Thank you very much. I will apologize to my wife, who's unable to be here tonight, and she has asked me to read this statement. This is to address, the question was, what are the 3 most important functions of the Executive Council? The Executive Council has many duties, including oversight of the state's treasury, infrastructure management, approval of judges, and approval of state commissioners. Within these duties, the 3 most important are fiscal oversight, transportation management, and constituent services. The fiduciary oversight is the most critical of these duties. All state contracts in excess of $10,000 require a review and approval by the Executive Council. This review is not simply a glossing over of contracts. Careful attention to detail, which I am extremely proud of, has led to multiple changes in state policy and improvement of services for constituents. For instance, in the council meeting today, I noted deficiencies in the annual reporting and auditing of the state's $500 million pension plan. This was a surprise to the remainder of the council and the governor, who vowed to take action. Previously, I have noted deficiencies in the state Medicare Advantage program, which led to mail-order pharmacy problems for retirees in the system. Through direct contact with the managed care organization, I helped resolve this problem. I have also demanded that managed care organizations meet federal standards for lead testing in infants and provide coverage for FDA-approved drugs and biologics. Transportation. Serving on the Governor's Advisory Council on Intermodal Transportation, otherwise known as GASSET, which directs the 10-year improvement plan, has been a focus for me. I've been responsible for 67 fully funded projects totaling $717 million. These projects include 15 in Portsmouth, in particular a $26 million clean water infrastructure improvement, an $18 million contract for sound walls along I-95, and a privacy fence at the new Franklin School. The sound walls had been delayed for decades, and it was only through my direct intervention with a contract higher than expected, when a contract higher than expected threatened this project, my intervention with DOT led to its approval. I'm especially proud of my direct constituent services for the 32 towns and cities in my district. My projects include $12.9 million in local fiscal recovery as part of the COVID crisis, $26 million for clean water in Portsmouth, and today's approval of a $1 million stipend for Portsmouth fishermen to rebuild the condemned co-op dock building. My record for health care has recently been highlighted by calling out Exeter Hospital for abrupt cessation of services, including acute life-saving, neurology, podiatry, and pediatric dentistry. I was able to bring these issues to the Department of Justice, resulting in a review of these services and continuation at least through March of next year. I have advocated an increased access to women's health care, including maternal care and cancer screening at federally qualified access facilities, with new services in Raymond and funding for providers in Belknap. I might add that District 3 is the only one to have these services expanded. I supported the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, Emergency Fuel Assistance, and kept many residents in their homes during COVID. I was a champion of the $100 million Invest in New Hampshire housing program, which provides for low-income housing. Highway safety has been a focus due to 5 of the 11 most dangerous roads are in District 3. After the tragic death of a Brentwood resident who was a veteran, I directed DOT to implement road safety measures. My hard work has led to endorsements by the Professional Firefighters Association and State Employees Union. I've also pledged that I will not support a sales or income tax. I was allowed by my wife to make some editorial comments as well, and I hope that falls under the 3 minutes, but I cannot believe how much work it takes to be an executive counselor in New Hampshire. It is more than a full-time job. There are meetings every 2 weeks with the governor and going over budgets, and basically the state troopers come to your house with, if it's a good meeting, it's only 2, but some meetings it's 3 file boxes of contracts that have to be reviewed in detail. How she keeps all that straight and manages to do the constituent work on top of that is, I'm in total admiration, and I hope that you will take that into regard and support her during the election in November. Thank you very much. I noticed as well here, I was also instructed not to answer questions, so I apologize. So
There goes our question.
there goes your question. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stevens. And now we will hear from Councillor Stevens' Democratic challenger, John Morgan. Mr. Morgan has been asked to answer the same question in his opening statement as well. What are the 3 most important functions of the New Hampshire Executive Council? Mr. Morgan?
Thank you so much, Beth, and thank you for hosting the forum as well. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you all today. I'm a former state senator. I'm a current Brentwood Select Board member. I'm serving in my second term over in Brentwood, where I'm raising my incredible 3 little boys, Thomas, William, and Gabriel, who are 12, 9, and 6, keep us very busy in that household. And I work in cybersecurity. My wife of 15 years, Katie, is incredible superwoman who I'm very proud of. She just finished the Chicago Marathon this past weekend, and she she beat my time, so that wasn't so great for me. But I think, in summing up in 3 minutes who you are and how you're going to vote and all of your work history and my professional service in the Select Board and the State Senate, it's really hard to do. So one of the things that I would really like to share with you that tells you who I am, how I'm going to approach things on the Executive Council, is this saying that was passed down to me from my dad, who grew up way up north in Berlin, the mill town, if you're not familiar with it. But Dad would always tell me and my brother, really emphasize it, really meant it. So always leave the wood pile higher than you found it. And that really rubbed off on me in this really just very meaningful, visceral way. Something that Katie and I have tried to instill in our boys, both in terms of how we treat each other with respect, and how we perform service for our community. So, in terms of the question is exactly. Let me get it exactly correct here, Beth.
I'll repeat it for you.
What are the 3 most important functions of the New Hampshire Executive Council? I've been going around to our 32 towns and communities throughout this amazing district and telling people about the 3 C's. 3 C's: contracts, courts, and commissioners. The Executive Council has been around for a couple hundred years at this point, and so many people, you'd be shocked, don't understand what it is. Contracts, courts, commissioners. So, as you heard from Dr. Stevens, all of the contracts, $10,000 and above, have to go through and be approved by a majority of the Executive Council, 3 out of the 5 members at least. Now, my opponent has 5 times voted to reject funding for our women's reproductive health care centers in the state. That's a travesty, and that's not something that I plan on continuing when I'm sitting in that seat. Commissioners. My father was a superintendent of public schools. My mother's a public school teacher. I'm a public school kid myself. My 3 kids go to public schools, and I am a firm believer in, believe it or not, public schools. We have a commissioner of education who right now wakes up every single day and looks to erode the public education system in the state of New Hampshire. Now, our executive counselor has voted to reconfirm Commissioner Adablut to that position, and that is something that I am going to take a very hard line against. Now, the last C is courts. The Executive Council has to confirm all of the state-level judges that sit on our courts. We found out today that another Supreme Court justice is going to need to be nominated and confirmed. This summer, our current executive counselor, my opponent, voted to confirm a New Hampshire Supreme Court justice who refused to state their position on judicial precedents of the Dobbs decision or Roe v. Wade. Well, when I'm executive counselor, that is not something that I will tolerate. I want to know the answers to hard questions, and that's going to be how I'm going to approach this position when I'm the next executive counselor for District 3. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. And we'll just dive right in with something you mentioned in your opening statement and Dr. Stevens mentioned on his wife's behalf, the women's clinics. So your opponent has said that she does, well, you have said that your opponent has voted to defund Planned Parenthood. And her response to that is that she is only voting against abortion. She does not vote against access to cancer screenings, mammograms, and family planning.
Yeah,
Can you address that?
Yeah, that's really unfortunate that Councilor Stevens can't at least be honest and open about her positions. I mean, for someone who believes so much in transparency, just be transparent about why you're voting. In 2021, the Department of Health and Human Services performed an audit on our reproductive health care centers in the state of New Hampshire and very clearly determined that our reproductive health care centers, including Lamprey, which is here in our district, and the Planned Parenthood centers throughout the state, most certainly do not use any of those funds that go before the Executive Council for abortion care services. But what they do is use them for cancer screenings, for contraceptive care, for family planning, mental health screenings, etc. Now, Councilor Stevens, you can go and look at the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. Planned Parenthood has endorsed me and my campaign this cycle, but you can just Google it. I Google Janet Stevens and defunding Planned Parenthood 5 times in her time sitting in that seat.
Thank you. And constituent relations. Councilor Stevens, as stated in her husband's opening statement on her behalf, has brought long-sought sound barriers to Portsmouth. I think they've been 30 years in the making or something.
Absolutely.
And also, in terms of the wider district, in terms of contracts that she has brought to the district, I think over like $300 million worth of contracts. If you were elected to take her place, in the likely event that you would be a minority member of the Executive Council, how would you...
let's not jump to conclusions here.
How would you replicate addressing constituent services and providing needed funding for your towns and municipalities?
Oh, such a great question. So, it's a little deceiving, not calling Councilor Stevens deceiving in this particular regard, but it is a little deceiving to say she brought $300 million or whatever, $18 million sound barriers, because really what that money is, to be very clear, is federal money that our federal delegation brought in from Washington. And the Executive Council had the privilege of working through the different various options of how to put that money in different pots throughout the state of New Hampshire. So one of my major priorities would be to make sure that we fully fund our mental health care system, which has not been fully funded in the state of New Hampshire. They've asked for $12 million, and they've got far less than even half of that here in our own district, unfortunately. So constituent services, to be clear, though, I will applaud Councilor Stevens on her hard work in this regard, and Dr. Stevens has alluded to the fact that this is tough work. It was really hard work when I was in the state Senate. I remember those days. I prided myself on ensuring that every single communication, whether it was a phone call, an email, a letter, or a personal visit to my office, got a personal response, and that is something that will continue. And of course, much easier to do in the town of Brentwood, where I serve as a select board member, but I carry the same philosophy there as well.
And lastly, contracts. The threshold for review of contracts by state agencies by the Executive Council has been at $10,000 since I don't even know when. Do you think that is a sustainable amount, and should that amount be raised in order to allow state government to work more efficiently?
Dr. Stevens, I wish you were up here answering that question, because maybe those 3 boxes from the state police could be whittled down to a box and a half if we were able to move that limit a little bit. But yeah, I think you make a really valid point that the $10,000 threshold is probably a little antiquated at this point and needs to be reviewed.
Okay. So you touched on judicial appointments, courts. And Supreme Court Justice, I'm not aware of who actually resigned today or who is stepping down. But more broadly, what would you look for in appointments to the Circuit, Superior, and Supreme Court?
So each one of those courts is going to have different issues that are coming before them. And so one of the really critical things for me when I'm going to be sitting in that seat for representing District 3 is to be asking to first of all, understand the specificities around each one of those appointments and confirmations that we'll be having to make, but then also making sure that we ask the tough questions. One of the things that I am incredibly highly focused on in terms of all the confirmations, not just the courts, is making sure that we're not just rubber stamping political appointees based on a political party. This this office, it's not supposed to have been political. It's supposed to be an oversight office. And that's something that I think is really important that we get back to. I mean, this is a vestige of the colonial era, post-Revolutionary War, when we were creating the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire. Everyone was farmers, and people were really scared of having another monarch. That's the purpose of the Executive Council. That's why we have one of the weakest governors in the entire country, constitutionally speaking. And I think we really need to go back to letting the legislature determine, have the power of the purse string, the way that it was constitutionally supposed to be set up, and then going back to the just having traditional oversight and not this extreme political agenda being brought to the Executive Council. And that would be my plan for how to approach things.
Okay, thank you. I think you may have the attention of some House of Representatives over there. Thank you very much, Mr. Morgan, and thank you very much, Dr. Stevens, on behalf of your wife. If you would like to read a closing statement now, you may.
Sure. The thing, I was recently talking with somebody about why I choose to pursue public service. And really the answer is because I see it as a responsibility and an obligation. I see it as an obligation not only to my community and to the people that I serve, but to be quite honest with you, to my 3 little boys too. I want the New Hampshire to be as good or better than the New Hampshire for them than it was for me. Now I can't go back to Franconia Notch and put the old man on the mountain back up. I can't do that, right? But I remember that crushing feeling in my soul that day that those rocks tumbled off of that mountain. I told you my dad grew up in Berlin, and I used to drive up through that notch all the time, and we would wave to the old man. The New Hampshire that I knew and that I know today and love so much, we have so much incredible potential. There's so much more that we can do. And when we find a better way to work together and remove this extreme partisan agenda that is being driven on the Executive Council, man, I think that we're really going to catch the next wave of excitement and optimism and drive this state forward to be the best place in the country to get a great job, have a great education, and live a long, healthy retirement. So thank you so much for your time, and really appreciate meeting y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. And thank you, everyone. This concludes tonight's forum. Thank you to the candidates and to the public for attending. Special thanks to city staff for all of their assistance. Thank you all, and please remember to vote on November 5th. Good night.